Hello, I'm Janet Morano, the Executive Director of Priests for Life. I also co-founded the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, which is the largest mobilization of moms and dads and grandparents and siblings who regret their abortion experience, but after coming through healing, they speak out publicly to change hearts and minds and to bring more people to healing. Well, today we are going to talk about healing from abortion from a man's perspective. That's right, because very often we hear about abortion, we think the impact on the mom, but the father is also affected. Notice I say father, not women and men. That's very important because they're mothers and fathers that are aborting their children. It's a very important thing to remember. Well, joining me today are two experts in this field. The first is going to be Kevin Burke, and he and his wife, Teresa Burke, founded Rachel's Vineyard, which is the largest abortion recovery program in the world. And also joining me is Father Ben Cameron from the Fathers of Mercy based in Kentucky. And he heads up a Rachel's Vineyard retreat team. So, gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Well, Father Ben, I want to start with you for a minute. We know priests, their lives are very busy, with mass, confession, sacraments, and all of that. What brought you to just not only participate in Rachel's Vineyard retreat weekends, but to be the head of a team there in Kentucky? Can we hear your story? What drew you to this ministry?
Sure. Well, our main work as the Fathers of Mercy is we are parish missionaries and retreat masters. And so I would travel around the country and even outside the country and working with people. And I just kept meeting more and more people who were wounded by abortion. And I didn't really know what to do, how to help them other than hear their confession and assure them of God's forgiveness. And I knew there was something more needed. And so I'd heard about Rachel's Vineyard. And I'd been recommending it for a while, but without personal knowledge of it. And so I did something strange. I called the hotline and said, "This is who I am, and can I come and observe one of your retreats?" And the lady answering the hotline said, "No, you can't come observe one of the retreats, but you can make one of the retreats." So I got permission to do so, and I flew to Philadelphia and made a retreat there back in 2004. And I was so moved by what I experienced in myself and what I observed in those making the retreat with me that I asked my superior and the bishop of Western Kentucky, the Diocese of Owensboro, if I could work in getting a team started here. And the rest is history. So,
right. Yeah. So this question, I'm going to go to Kevin now. Now, Father Ben said he made a retreat as a retreatant, but obviously he did not have his own abortion experience. And I know this is a requirement because I've done it myself. I've been on team too at Rachel's Vineyard, but explain to people, and maybe someone's watching that might be interested in getting involved with Rachel's Vineyard and would have the same reaction. But wait a minute, I didn't have an abortion. How do I make a Rachel's Vineyard retreat then to get that training?
It's really essential for anyone who wants to be a laborer in the Lord's vineyard to first initially experience the process, to really enter into that on a personal and emotional and spiritual level. So what we invite people to do, because obviously many people who help with the ministry do not necessarily have abortion in their background. However, oftentimes there are other ways that they've been touched by abortion. For instance, if they've been involved in the pro-life movement, they were praying outside abortion centers, or they were unable to prevent an abortion, and that really touched them personally. Or actually, they'll learn that how deeply that can wound you in your pro-life work when you are unable sometimes to protect those mothers and fathers and their babies from abortion. Perhaps you have a family member lost a niece or nephew to abortion, or you suspect you may have. You can bring that experience and that person, the mother and the father, the child, to the retreat process. So, or sometimes there's another area of loss or rejection or hurt. We invite them to bring that to the retreat process and go through that experience. So that's essential. And of course, the other part is just listening, and Father Ben will know and will echo this. the experience of watching people go through that process, how they enter the weekend with the fear and pain and shame, and oftentimes great anger, because there's a sense of being victimized and abandoned and rejected in various ways. Just having that experience, seeing that, it's like a master's class in abortion healing, because you hear the stories of all the participants. We spend all Saturday morning, sometimes a little bit after that, just hearing the abortion stories in the context of their lives, not just the abortion story, but put in the context of other events that might have contributed to that abortion. So that whole weekend experience is really powerful and very essential for those doing the work.
Right. Okay, so Father Ben, one thing you said, which I think is so important, you said you were hearing women's confessions or men who had abortion experiences and telling them God's forgiveness, but then you were feeling this like that's not enough. What is the thing that Rachel's Vineyard takes them beyond the confessional? What is that secret to that?
So the confessional, of course, has to do with God's forgiveness and being reconciled with God and the church. But a lot of times people have difficulty accepting the forgiveness themselves or forgiving themselves, their own forgiveness of themselves, their own being able to put it into the past and leave it in the past rather than keep dredging it up a lot. Because there's emotional, psychological, spiritual wounding that happens with an abortion experience. And so what Rachel's Vineyard does, I think in an extremely beautiful way, is it combines both the spiritual and the emotional slash psychological elements of healing. There are some programs that focus just on the emotional and psychological, and their individual therapy or group therapy, and there's others that try to do it all on a spiritual. But Rachel's Vineyard combines them both very well and kind of integrates them into a whole, so that whether a person's wounding is more on the emotional wounding or the spiritual wounding or a mixture of both, it's all getting addressed at the same time. And what I found in working in this, I've been involved with Rachel's Vineyard since 2004, is in the years I've been working with it, is I see more and more how the richness of Catholic spiritual tradition is incorporated, even when maybe Teresa didn't even know what she was incorporating, because there's elements from Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas and Ignatius Loyola that are incorporated into how the retreat works, that really help to make it very powerful and very effective. And I don't know if Teresa had ever read any of them, but it's the truth is the truth, and so whether you come to it directly, intentionally, or whether you come to it through a different path, that's what Rachel's Vineyard is doing. It's helping address all those elements of woundedness and help people to accept that healing, and to process their emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah. Now I'm going to give you both a chance at the next question. Very often people will say, well, being the woman is the one who had the abortion, like maybe she doesn't want men in the room with her. She doesn't want the guys there, especially because these men aren't the men that she had an abortion experience with. And some people believe that, you shouldn't mix up men and women in the same healing group. And so other people feel like, oh, it should be just a one-on-one with a counselor. So start with you, Kevin. Obviously, Teresa and you formulated this to be with men and women together, if need be. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Let me say at the outset, I think that having different programs available for folks, it's a good thing. I think that there are some men who may benefit either initially or maybe as a main mode of healing, participating in all men's Bible study, for instance, something like Project Joseph or the Save One Bible studies. They have ones for men and women. So I think that's okay. And somebody might talk initially to their priest or to to a counselor or to a caring friend about their abortion experience. That might be their initial experience. And so some of those things can be in and of themselves helpful, help you get back on track in your faith and your emotional life and in your relationships. What I saw in Rachel's Vineyard, which was very beautiful, was how men and women, because look, at the heart of this wound, it's a wound between men and women. It takes place within the context of, our most intimate, emotional, physical relationships. No matter how temporary or transitional the relationship might have been, the circumstances of the conception, etc., it's taking place within that context. So the wounds run deep, and oftentimes the symptoms you see are manifested in relationships and anger and communication and trust issues. So when women and men journey together, what happens is a woman might come initially having been rejected and hurt by a man in her abortion experience. As she sees another man present there, whether it's the clergy person, a deacon, or a man who has experienced abortion loss, and he begins to unpack his own abortion story, and she sees the grief and pain that he went through, the tears eventually, his love, and being able to embrace that child as he continues in that healing journey. That is can be through the Holy Spirit's grace. It could be part of their own healing journey of their woundedness with men. So it provides opportunities for grace and for additional healing, just having a man present. That's just one way I think of. Father Ben, I'd be interested in your feedback.
Yeah, so Father Ben, you've actually done these retreats since 2004, so that's countless retreats. You obviously have had men on those retreats with women.
Right.
Give us a little of your insight of the experience you see those men having.
One of the first retreats we ever had, I remember a woman who came, and when she first got there and she saw that there were men there, she said, "There's men here," and she was really angry. But what I noticed is during the course of the retreat, it was her interaction with one of the men was one of the most important things in her healing journey. It began to heal. She was wounded by a man, or maybe more than one man, and having a man there who actually cared, who actually was there for healing and wanting to help others, just kind of began to open up so that she could begin to heal in regard to men in general. I've also seen where a married couple comes to the retreat, and a lot of times the man is there. He's like, "Well, I'm supporting my wife," but during the course of the retreat, he comes to understand how wounded he is. That the essence of his manhood, for us men, being a protector is one of the most important things about being a man. And when a man realizes he did not protect the woman he loved, he did not protect his child, whether he tried to and failed, or whether he didn't try to, whether he stood by silently or he pushed her to have the abortion. When a man comes to recognize his own woundedness, it can actually just completely change the marriage in a very positive way. There's a couple that made the retreat with us that afterwards the husband said that Rachel's Vineyard retreat was the best thing that's ever happened to their marriage. And that couple has since joined our team and helped to put on the retreats. But so there is an element of men humbling themselves, men who are wounded and recognizing their woundedness, and that helps the women. But also, even when a man is there who is not directly involved with abortion, the very fact that a man is there and spending the weekend with them and caring for them, because in every abortion, there's at least one man who fell flat on his face and didn't do what he should have done. And sometimes there's more than one. There's always the father of the child, but sometimes it's the young woman's own father, the grandfather of the child. Sometimes it was her brother or somebody else who should have stood up, should have helped her and didn't. And so by men being there, by men participating, it actually helps not only the men heal, but it helps the women heal.
Yeah.
So I want to see men make the retreat with women.
Yeah. Well, I was, I was also part of a team back up in New York, And on one retreat, we had all women but one man. And at first, the women had the same reaction. Why is this guy here? But then he felt a little uneasy too, because he goes, I'm the only man here. But partway through the retreat, at a certain point, he told all the women, well, I may not be the guy that, is part of your abortion experience, but on behalf of them, I want to apologize to all you women for putting you into a position to abort your baby. Well, that was one of the most powerful things that happened, because the tears were flowing, and the healing that took place from that point forward on the retreat was amazing to see. That it was like he stood in the gap for all those other men that were just absent, from these women's lives, but were men who had forced or pressured them into that abortion experience. So he kind of represented them for them, and it was really, really powerful. So I agree, Father Ben. It's amazing when you can have men on retreats, because I've seen the power of it. But I'd like to go over to Kevin now, because I think there's a new study out, which a lot of studies are out there about women and abortion, but I think there's a new one out about men and abortion. Can you give us some of those facts?
Sure. This study, they surveyed 1,000 men, and 100 men responded to the survey that would meet the criteria of having experienced abortion and would participate in the study. So of that 100 men, about half, 45%, reported that they had no voice or choice in their partner's abortion decision. Let me give you a little caveat on that from our experience in Rachel's Vineyard. I would guess that a lot of those men probably bought into the propaganda that they hear from the pro-abortion movement in our society, which is it's her private and personal decision. The best way you could be supportive is to not say anything.
Right.
I would venture to say that a good portion of those men may have stayed silent, and that's going to be part of their wound as far as the abortion concern. So we have half saying they felt that they had no part in the decision. It said that of that group, 71% said they experienced, and this is interesting language, an adverse change in themselves after the abortion experience. An adverse change. And that was, that was true among men who would describe themselves as pro-choice or pro-abortion. They also reported, a good percentage of them, that they had experienced an adverse impact on themselves. And I thought that language was interesting because I think it touches on something Father Ben spoke of, which is that an abortion, and this is something I've seen many years in this work, abortion violates something fundamental to our identity as men. As Father Ben mentioned, that role of protecting and providing. And really, as I write about in my book, Tears of the Fisherman, and there's a chapter entitled The Sin of Adam. When I was doing retreats initially, I was struck by the role of men oftentimes reflects, in some ways, it's kind of a metaphor of the experience of Adam in the garden, where he was silent before the serpent. The serpent's, the diabolical force of evil, the great dragon, is testing and tempting this woman at a time of vulnerability, and telling her this is the option that will save your life. This will help you, and this will help free you and empower you. And but oftentimes, like Adam is standing and watching this scene, but he doesn't stand in to protect the woman. So I think that the adverse effect is because when you participate in the death of your unborn child, regardless of the circumstances, and obviously some circumstances will be more traumatic for the man, but even when he is in a peripheral role and doesn't have any conscious sense that it hurt him, what we learn later is, on a very deep level, as a man, spiritually and emotionally, in his identity, it has injured him. And that can have repercussions in his life and his future relationships and parenting. And that's why the healing message is so important.
Right. And Father Ben, if there's men who are listening right now, and maybe had an abortion experience, what could you say to kind of encourage them to take the next step, to come on a retreat? Because I think very often, men will listening to this and may identify what we're just talking about right now, but then say, oh, I don't know if I could do it or should do it. What could you say to those men right now?
I think that any man who has been touched by abortion should make the retreat. He should gather his courage and go ahead and make the retreat. It may be a little uncomfortable at first, but it's one of the most important things that you can do for your own healing. And sometimes we may not even realize that we're wounded, but we are wounded, and the relationships are wounded. I have seen many married couples where there is a wound in the relationship because the woman, the wife, realizes that she's wounded, but her husband has been in denial that he's wounded. So if a man has been involved with an abortion, he needs to step up and just do the retreat, because during that course he's going to start seeing how it has impacted his life in ways that maybe he didn't even realize. But now that he comes to realize them, it can begin to change. It can begin to heal the relationship and make the marriage stronger. Um, you know, all kinds of healing can happen that we didn't even know was going to happen. I wasn't involved in an abortion. And yet when I made the Rachel's Vineyard, I experienced tremendous healing in different areas in my life. And I know that will happen with any man who goes and makes the retreat as well.
Right. And now, very often, we hear of men who probably had an abortion experience when they were in college, get a girl pregnant, partying, whatever. And goes off and has an abortion, and he forgets about it till he later marries. And then his wife is having a baby for the first time, and I'm going to be a dad. And then flashback, right? Oh my goodness, this is not my first baby. So Kevin, could you speak to that experience and how important it is for them to get healing, even if, that was a thing in the past and now they're with their wife, but she didn't have an abortion and she didn't know about this prior abortion. But why is it important to bring this out in the marriage, almost in marriage prep, and not wait till you're at that aha moment where your wife is pregnant and you're thinking back to this abortion?
Yeah, well, it would certainly be ideal if those who are doing marriage prep can find a way that's a very sensitive way to just make folks aware that if they have this pregnancy loss in their past, particularly they were participated in abortion or multiple abortions in any way, that it would be good for them to consider a healing program, and that healing program, while it will feel scary, it does require some courage and humility to take that step, will really bless you and bless your relationships, your parenting. God is very generous and merciful and loving, and it's going to bless your life. So I think it's a very positive. We can give a very positive message to folks who are dealing with that. So I think that's one area that is very, very important to consider. The other is that the experience of abortion, it sometimes it feels like to a man, say in college, and it's a one night stand or a transitional relationship, or there was drinking involved. There can be a sense of relief that the problem has seemingly been resolved. But at the same time, if you step back and they're honest, they'll realize that, as we've talked about, it has wounded you. So just have that humility and courage, but know that the healing journey is going to bless you, particularly if you may be acting out on some of the shame about your role in that abortion and not realize it. You could be looking at pornography. Obviously, there could be a number of factors that feed that behavior. But one of the things that can feed it is unresolved guilt and shame. You can act out those painful emotions that you're not dealing with through various kinds of addictive behavior. And certainly pornography is one way. Drinking, anger issues are very common. You can be snapping at your kids. You could be distant and snappy at times with your wife or in the workplace and not have any idea that that's related to grief about your role in abortion. It's very surprising to men when they go through a retreat and how deeply it impacted them. But let me assure you that it did. But let me assure you more strongly that healing will bless your life much more abundantly than abortion wounded your life. That's the mercy and love, a generous love and mercy of God.
Well, I want to remind everyone, you can go to the website, rachelsvineyard.org, and there you can see where the nearest retreat is to where you live. And sometimes people want to go to a retreat like in a neighboring state even. They travel a little bit because they don't want to go too close to home, which is fine too. So you go to rachelsvineyard.org. There's a lot of articles there by Teresa and Kevin Burke and other experts. So it's a real treasure map up there on the internet. So rachelsvineyard.org. And then finally, Father Ben, if there are any clergy listening, can you give a word of encouragement for them? First of all, with Father's Day coming up, the preaching, when they tell everyone stand, all the dads, please stand for a special blessing. Now, if there's a man sitting there who had an abortion loss, unhealed, and has no children, just like the way mothers feel on Mother's Day, doesn't this impact the dad? So what can you say to sensitize some of our clergy who might be listening and maybe give them an invitation to get involved?
Well, it's really hard to know how to say something like that. And, because you want to bless the moms and bless the dads, Mother's Day and Father's Day. And it's really hard to know how to say that without maybe making somebody feel uncomfortable. But I think whenever priests and deacons and ministers talk about abortion, and especially about the evil of abortion, we need to always bring in the mercy of God, the healing of God. We need to always give people hope. I think one of the very sad things is when people take away a message of despair or of condemnation, whereas we do need to condemn the sins within ourselves, but we also need to always have that door of hope. We always need to know that God's mercy is there, that He wants to heal, He wants to restore us. And one of my favorite sayings is that the old nursery rhyme about Humpty Dumpty is a lie when it comes to King Jesus. King Jesus can heal anything. And in fact, He can put us back together better than we ever were before. And so we want to always be preaching the truth about the evil of abortion, but also the truth about God's mercy, God's healing, and inviting people to come to Rachel's Vineyard, or another program that is for healing of the wounds. Though of course I'm partial to Rachel's Vineyard because of, like I said, how it addresses the spiritual and emotional all together in such an integrated way.
Right. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today. Thank you to Kevin Burke, one of the co-founders of Rachel's Vineyard, and thank you to Father Ben Cameron, Fathers of Mercy, who has devoted many, many years in the vineyard with Rachel's Vineyard. So God bless you both, and thank you for all the healing you bring to so many.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay. Well, brothers and sisters, thank you for joining me today. And I hope you remember this message of healing. It's for men, it's for women, it's for grandparents, all those who have been involved in abortion. You can go to rachelsvineyard.org. Again, rachelsvineyard.org, where you can find the healing for yourself or someone you know and love that needs it. This is Janet Marana, Executive Director of Priests for Life. Thank you, and God bless.